Beep, boop, boop, boop. That means hello and welcome to the Large Blast podcast in Mechanicus, because we're doing the Large Blast podcast Mechanicus edition. I'm your host, Stoney, and I'm joined, as always, by Welshie.
Hello.
And Matt.
Praise the Omnissiah.
And we're here today to talk to you about all things Warhammer, in particular Mechanicus-based Warhammer things. But before we get on with that, we like to do a little thing called Hobbies Goings On. So, Welshie, what have you been up to in your Hobbies Goings On?
I had a massive tidy up today. That was probably the most exciting thing I've done in my hobby this week. Actually dusted and hoovered my paint and hobby shelves and rearranged my bits boxes into different factions, and whether it's melee weaponry or ranged weaponry for future conversions. Other than that,
that's pretty.
The painting
that's
I've been
super
doing.
Satisfying, to be fair.
Yeah,
like,
it is
you
really
know, after you've been
satisfying.
doing a bit of work and everything's got all mixed together, you feel daunted starting a new project. You're like, oh, where did I leave that leg? I fucking chucked it in the knife box or something random, you know. So you got to.
There's none of that.
I feel you. See.
Yeah, it is an administratum validated filing system.
Nice.
And other than that, the painting has been very, very dull. So as you guys know, I've been working on this big, giant knight, the Asterius Knight, where I've been painting these kind of freehand panels. So I've done all of the panels from the waist down, which means it's time to paint endless amounts of golden trim, which is the most boring painting that I've done for a long, long time. But every panel that goes on, you feel a little bit better. But it's not fun work, I can tell you that.
You know, I've never tried it myself, but I remember hearing that someone, I think it was on that Independent Characters podcast, where they were they're talking about using metallic Sharpies
pens.
for doing
I've seen people using
gold
them.
and silver pens and stuff for doing like edging.
I've seen it on.
It's probably better if you're doing a whole army or something rather than, you know, want to get every little piece right on your massive Titan. But I don't know. Still, maybe
I've seen it on marine size models. It works really well, but because the Titan's so big, they're like 4 mil wide, so you'd really see the colouring in. So I've had to do it the old fashioned method. But I found a good actually using one of the Games Workshop gold tutorials for Black Legion, actually a kind of dirtier, grimier gold. So yeah, following that, but it's dull, so it's nice to break it up with a bit of a spring clean.
There you go. Spring cleaning out with the old and in with the new. They call him Matthew. What have you been up to?
Not a lot again, but I decided to make my Cypher model, and I've been painting him a bit here and there, and hopefully get him finished next week. And I have actually, I've been assembling loads of my sister's stuff, getting ready to paint them. But Cypher will end up talking about the Dark Angels later, I'm sure. But I feel they're going to be involved in the Warhammer Fest. So I think there's loads of stuff coming for Dark Angels soon. Not necessarily the Dark Angels, but they're going to be involved in all the new lore updates, which is why I decided to paint him. I felt inspired to paint the traitor.
Keep an eye out for Cypher popping up later in the episode, I suppose.
Yeah. What about you, Stoney?
What have I been up to? I finished doing the model that I was talking about before, where I was doing the fisherman thing, my 28 mag, which turned out to be finished long after the 28 mag competition was done. But nevertheless, I finished it. I did it. In the end, I completely bottled it on all the light sourcing stuff I was talking about. Mostly just because it's kind of like light sourcing. It's one of those kind of thing that's always kind of cooler in your mind. You know, it's kind of like, so in my head, I'd had all this idea for this cool light sourcing, but I forgot that to really make it look good, I'd have to paint a lot of dark as well. So I'd planned for a lot of the light, but I hadn't really planned for a lot of the dark. And it's just not really how I wanted to do it. And, you know, so I finished this. I think it's pretty cool. This like walker thing, wandering through, doing some fishing, you know, and one of the things that I did use on this, the resin I got, and this is kind of, I'm not even sure if I should really give this out as a recommendation, because this resin on one hand was really good, but it's kind of one of those products that's sort of on the verge of being sort of something that should just be used industrially in a way, because it like fucked up a bunch of stuff I tried to use it with, melted through a bunch of plastic, like really was like stunk up the house for weeks. But if you think you can handle it and you've had a little bit of like experience with resin and stuff in the past, and this shit is quality, and you get it from Swindon Composite Supplies.com, and the whole website, it's all done in like Comic Sans, obviously done secondary to what they've got going on, and the shit is pretty crazy. But I got like the effects. I did a few test pours before using it and got some like fucking crazy good different effects with it, that you get all these different ideas for doing different projects and things with water and stuff now. But I must say, like, it's not like any other resin I've ever used. It stunk up the entire house. It like fucking glued stuff together. It like in ways that I hadn't really had happened before. Yeah, I one of the things that I was doing was I got some plastic aquarium glass, like grass and plants and stuff that I was using as bits of foliage. I painted it up and used it as bits of foliage. And you might notice that there's some lily pads on top of the water in the thing that I made. Those are actually melted bits of aquarium grass that were sticking. That was supposed to be like reeds that were sticking out of the water, and then it melted into a bead during the experiment. So I just did that, and then cut a section out like a cheese shape, like a triangle out to make it look like it was a lily pad kind of thing. But it did that, and then when I mixed it in a plastic cup. And poured it out into the thing, and then the remaining resin in the cup melted the cup. It's pretty hardcore, but horrible. The stuff is really good, and it came with a load of different coloring pigments. It's really good stuff, but literally I can't even keep it in the house because it stinks so much. Get it at your warning, but it's definitely got some good products. It's a good product if you can hack it.
Great stuff. I had one question, which was, how did you do the splash? So there's a great bit where the bolt's going into the fish and the water's splashing up, but that can't have been pour resin. How did you build that up?
That was actually made from bits of my test pours, because I was just pouring. In the end, I got some kind of takeaway type containers, those aluminium ones, and was just poured into that. Really sort of shallow layer just to color test.
So it's like sliced and smashed up pigments, bits of dry.
But so basically I smashed that up like it was a sheet of glass from Breaking Bad, and then stuck it in like it was a fucking cake, one of these fancy cakes you see with bits of chocolate stuck out the top or something. Nice. That was basically it. And then the rest of the ripples and stuff, a good old fashioned clear silicone. Which is not the best way to do it, I know, but I wish, that's the other thing, is I'm just so bad at taking pictures of the models that I make. It looks so different in real life to what I've got. There's a bunch of stuff going on in the water. That was one of the things about being able to get this really nice clarity in the water, was I just put a bunch of stuff in there, like there's fish, other different fish, like plants, all kinds of crazy stuff going on in the water. I put like a Necron skull in there as well, a half buried Necron. So looks like one day the Necron might come back and things, But but it's so the product is fucking quality, really good stuff. But maybe do it if you've got a garage or somewhere well ventilated and a bunch of plastic you don't mind burning through and experimenting with for a little while. It's the news. Wow. It's the chuffing news.
Have you heard? 6s are now 4s.
It's the news.
Chief Stealer Limo's back.
News. All right, everybody. So first piece of news is, if women wouldn't want to sleep with you enough for playing Warhammer, you can now get a T-shirt that says your favourite episode of White Dwarf on it and take that out with you on the pull. So what do you guys think about these?
I saw these and I consider myself quite geeky, and then I saw these and realised there is a whole nother level of love for White Dwarf. And then I saw the Tyrannid one, and I realised that I was one of those geeky people, and maybe I do want the Tyrannid one on a black background with some great Tyrannid infestation cover. Who knows what episode it is or what edition?
I'm sure I've got that White Dwarf, so that wasn't in the first. It's definitely only the first 150.
This is how they get you.
I might be lying there. That there are currently you can pick from 150, whether it's the first or not.
Yeah,
there are 400 and something. They said.
Yeah,
there's 150 options.
I'm sure I kind of started reading it about the 280 mark, because I remember getting the 300th magazine. was like a specially thick one. I think this, yeah, I didn't think it was a good idea at first, but there are some white dwarfs that I like remember the entire contents of and have a particularly fond memory of. So
but would
I
you
can
not
imagine
rather have a
them.
T-shirt with the actual art on rather than the cover of what? Like they've got the barcode on there. This is literally the cover of White Dwarf.
Yeah.
It's not.
But
like...
that kind of makes it funny. Do you get the back cover on the back of the T-shirt? That's what you should have.
Yeah, that is. I mean, aesthetically, that's something I don't like. So most of us are metal fans here, and I'm sure if you're listening, you play Warhammer, you're probably into your heavy metal too. I get that with a lot of like band T-shirts where they print the whole square of the album cover, and it just doesn't look as nice as when they print like just the symbology or the actual image from it. You're right. If you could get just the picture without the text and without maybe the background, it would be cooler. But there's certainly some that I think work and some that really, really don't.
I'm just not sure.
It makes you a bit like a sandwich board.
This is the
like
thing, is I'm going to sit
advert.
here and be like, this is the thing, is I'm going to sit here and be like, this is rubbish, this is garbage. And then I'm going to look on the site, I'm going to see a white dwarf, like you say, Matt, that I remember cover to cover. And I'm going to be like, I'm going to buy that and wear it every day.
Rolling in my 6-4.
Cool. So next up, we've got some new models coming out, and these are some new orcs. We've got some new beast snaggers, what were they called?
New beast snaggers, which are basically going to be the new snake bites models, which are one of the clans for orcs.
Yeah.
And then the ones on the right are what they've done to orcs in Age of Sigmar, just because I think they're basically replicating it.
Right. They've gone sort of more savage, less cartoony, more savage orcs. So this is so the snake bites in the old lore were the kind of ones that were more connected with nature, rode around on boars. Painted themselves blue, or was that that's the freebooters, isn't it? But they did anyway. They all that kind of stuff. But I think that this new model, in particular, I think it's the new Pain Boy or something like that. The guy with the claw and the metal head. I think this is a really cool model. I think that this is quite interesting when we look at what we've been talking about with the orc range. About it walking this line between being cartoony and being sort of taken seriously, because when you think about it, like you see this orc there, he's got a big metal hand or whatever, but that shit, like, it's all goofy, but like in the reality of that is fucking savage. He like chopped his own arm off and stuck a bunch of jagged metal in there and was like, right, let's just go and kick the shit out of people. Like, you know, it's fucking brutal. And sometimes the models didn't quite convey that. And I think that this model right here, this has got that kind of cartoony, he's got that cartoony energy, that sort of bounciness to him, but also that kind of grimdark. It really kind of actually reminds me of a bit like Quake 2, those kind of Strogue guys, or whatever they were called, the bad guys that were sort of half mechanical, half biological or whatever. But I think it's a really cool model. I think it goes really well, hopefully, more into this more serious, less of a joke army that the orcs have kind of become over the years.
Yeah, I thought the same. When they released, I think we talked about a couple of episodes ago, the first of these new beast snagger models with the chain axe, and I was really worried that they were basically just going to copy the Age of Sigmar cartoon orc look. But you're completely right. When they revealed this pain boss today, with his little Gretchen, who's had both his legs chopped off and replaced with a wheel and doesn't even have any hands, it looked much more orky for me. I think the only thing that would make it more grimdark is a less bright green with a darker green paint job. I think it would look really quite grim and horrible.
That tone of green is changing over time, isn't it? And it does add to that the feeling that we expressed before. But the little grot guy really caught my attention when I saw this earlier today. The big guy, I mean, I noticed his legs, and then I kind of carried on scrolling down. And the grot with his like spanner arm, I saw that and was like, I was just imagining cutting through the bone there. It looked, I didn't even notice the wheel. It's great.
He's got like a mask over his face, like he's not is scared of germs.
He doesn't have a mouth. Does he? Are they specifically for snake bites?
Well, this is something that the orc community online is being a bit confused by, because they're calling them the beast snaggers, right? And we had the weird squig rider guys that we were kind of throwing an iron about. This new model that they did today, the skull behind him actually has the snake bite symbol on it, so the twisted snakes as the snake bites, and the snake bites in the lore were essentially ones that lived on a planet without much tech, so they really were quite barbaric and caveman-y versions of the orcs. So it does fit within the lore that exists to have guys like this.
It's nice. Again, this is more of Warhammer, more Games Workshop pulling on old lore as well, like something that was kind of written out as now being kind of brought back. So that's always, we always get excited about that.
Right. So the next thing, to dive into a little bit of rumor abound and add to the rumors out there. This is something that I noticed and did a Reddit trawl and seemed other people had noticed too. We've talked a lot about these Games Workshop animations, and there was a guy called Codex on YouTube who made a great homemade video called Iron Within that was all about the Iron Warriors. And he was one of the guys that Games Workshop employed, took into their new animation house. And a few months later, this thing that was called Iron Within and was all about following the Iron Warriors had been replaced with Games Workshop saying that Iron Within is now focusing on two heroes of the Adeptus Militarum and seemed to be about a completely different thing to what this creator had originally set out to do when he wasn't being employed by GW. He hasn't made a statement on it, so we are just guessing and make that clear. Maybe this was something he always wanted to do. But I saw it and had a bit of fear that these things that we've loved that have gone out homemade on YouTube, are they all going to get kind of watered down to a Space Marine Imperium focused hero faction by Games Workshop, or are they going to let them do what they set out to do?
I mean,
of course they're not.
It's funny, yeah, because in a way we're saying, our Games Workshop going to let these people do this kind of stuff, but have always been super protective of their IP and kind of have never always sort of filtered down and kind of, we're sort of getting to the stage now where we're mentioning Games Workshop in the same breath as Marvel and these kind of big companies that have these massive franchises. And I'm sure that the people that write the scripts for the spec script for Avengers or whatever don't see it come out the same way at all as when it goes in. I mean, they just did that big thing with the Snyder Cut or whatever, didn't they? For some big film or whatever. That just goes to show you how much a team of people protecting a property can change something. So I think it would be crazy to imagine that you would go into this seeing the thing that you had created completely on your own in your bedroom come out exactly as it was going to. But is that a good thing or not? I can't say. We called it
when they announced that. We kind of all said they've been like bought out. Essentially, they've just been bought out. So they've lost their creative independence.
I think regardless of the storyline change, though, it still looks amazing. Like the quality of animation on this is going to be great. The guy's obviously super talented. I hope he gets to make the thing he wanted to make, and we're viewing it as dweebs online, and actually he's doing what he wants.
One of the things I think as well as a reference to, this kind of protecting of the IP is it would be kind of strange if the very first Games Workshop kind of animation was focused on the Iron Warriors and not their main, Imperial factions, which are their biggest range sellers, are the good guys. They didn't make Deadpool straight away. They had to bash out a bunch of other different kind of films before you get to the kind of weird bad guy character arcs and things. So I would be way more interested in watching an animation about the Iron Warriors than I would about two random Imperial Guardsmen. But what you're going to do.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll still be really fun to watch, and I'm just getting anxiety over nothing.
The internet is alive with the sound of random predictions about what's going on with the Fallen. Big Dark Angel news is about to happen. By now you guys probably know what it is when this comes out, but what do we think it might be, and how do we feel about it?
Yeah, well, this all kind of stems from the May edition of White Dwarf, which has in every month White Dwarf you get a preview of what's in the next magazine, and in April's it just said next month The Fallen, and now they've previewed the cover of White Dwarf, which will be posted out this coming week, and it's going to be an index to starties basically of how to use The Fallen in your games of 40k, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we had a big chat about this, I suppose, in more depth last episode when I talked about having read Gav Thorpe, friend of the show's latest book, Luthor, First of the Fallen, which basically ends, spoiler alert, skip forward 10 seconds, with Luthor being freed. So Luthor's around, we know he's about, and White Dwarf's got Cypher on the cover. How does this play into all of the lore? My personal theory is there's big civil war coming up, and Matt and I got very drunk and argued about this on Saturday, but I think there's going to be a big schism coming soon in the next couple of years within the Imperium, of olden Imperium, who are very anti-religion, everything's science, the Emperor is not a god, and modern Imperium, the Emperor is everything, he's a shining light. Okay. And I think the Fallen are going to play a big part in that.
Ooh, that's interesting, That is interesting because, yeah, obviously you could very well see a new, chaos faction of the Dark Angels. That's been on the kind of cards for a while, just like people say, oh, maybe there could be an Imperial faction of the Alpha Legion or one of these other things. So, I mean, we've definitely talked about the Civil War stuff in the past. I've got to say, I'm not entirely convinced that it's going to happen like all across the board, like you say, religion versus science. But I definitely can see that if it was ever going to happen, that this could be the start of it. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is where Warhammer Fest may tie into this sudden build-up of Dark Angels rumors. Although the Dark Angel Codex has come out in 9th edition, so I don't know. But I thought maybe they're going to lead into a new campaign, like one of their campaign books that they do, where supposedly the Fallen have been gathering in this star system for years and have built up the strength of a Space Marine Legion of the Horus Heresy era, and that they are planning something, they're about to do something, and all of this other stuff is kind of tied into that backstory arc, and there could be a campaign where maybe there's no new models, but there's just the lore of the 40k setting is updated through that, and then I think that might lead to the return of the Lion at the Warhammer Fest. He's going to come back, and he's going to come back to save the Dark Angels.
So if you're listening to this when it comes out after Warhammer Fest and the Lion has not arrived, you can laugh at Matthew now as he makes this prediction.
Or it could even be the beginning of
through
something
our Christmas Fulgrim predictions. Yeah. You can now say Large Glass Podcast fucked up another Primarch.
Matthew has finally picked a new Primarch for his predictions. I see this not just with this, but with developments in the lore. What I was saying about Valdor being back on the scene. I feel like there's some big things coming because they've been very quiet on things 40k for quite a while now. There's been lots of Age of Sigmar releases. They did hint that something big and green was coming for orcs in 40k, and my firm guess for Warhammer Fest then, if I'm going to pick one, would be plastic Squig-Off, because I think it fits really nicely with the Beast Snaggers and the Squig Riders, and I think a big plastic Squig-Off, the big rhino things, rather than the Forge World resin, will come out, which fills a nice kind of hole in the orc range for big kind of dynamic models.
Well, the Orc Codex is coming out. They've kind of confirmed after the Sisters, haven't they? So they could probably get both previewed this week in the Warhammer Fest.
And I'm obviously hoping for this one Tyrannid model that I'm going to get to be revealed as well this week.
Oh, well, maybe that'll be arranged that they'll do a complete revamp on. Yeah. I think they could do, it could be like complete new Imperial Guard range. Although, I don't know, the Black Templars, there's loads and loads of talk on the internet about Black Templars, and there's more hints.
Fits with the rumors. Civil War. Who do you want to fight the religious side of a civil war more than the Black Templars?
So next piece of exciting news on the Large Blast podcast is someone's won the Large Blast podcast competition to win the Ghast Keldrek Knight of Shrouds model. So if your username is Rigidbywrecked on Instagram, then send us your address because you've won a chuffing fucking model. Congratulations. See you on the next competition.
Well done. Woo! Update us on your progress.
So lock up your toaster and batten down your microwave because Welshie's only got a Mechanicus quiz for us all to ease us in to this, the Mechanicus edition of the Large Blast podcast. So Welshie, what have you got?
Yeah, as you say, I've got a nice quiz before we get deep into the lore, but I thought that this week it would be extremely unfair if I did a very deep lore-based quiz, being as one of the panelists, our Matthew Cousins, is a avid collector of the red-robed dudes, and one is very much not. So I've tried to make it more of a fun and less of a in-deep lore quiz this week. So some of the answers are kind of trick questions. Some of them are real lore. All right. So first come, first serve. So name any named character in 40k who is older than Belisarius Cool.
Trazin the Infinite.
Correct.
That's good.
Stoney out of the blocks.
Boom.
Number 2.
Because he's infinite. It's in the name.
It's all there. Number 2. Why would an orc mech be happy with a Martian tech priest's robe?
Because it's red.
And therefore,
it's the orky colour.
Goes faster. Point to Stoney. 2-0 out the block. Okay, Number 3. What is the name of Big Will Smith's favourite Skitarii unit?
The Sulphur Hounds?
The Sulphur Hounds, that's right, because they belong in which film, Stoney?
In the old Wiki Wild Wild West.
That's correct. But point to Matt there for knowing the name of the unit. Number 4, then. This is just a guess, really. But how many servo skulls are there on Belisarius Cool's model? No turning round, Matthew.
Well, I think I have a...
I'm going to go with 4.
1.
Matt's going with 1. Stoney's going with 4. It is 2. So Matt is slightly closer. It's 2 apiece after 4 questions. Number 5. Where in the 40k universe would you find the strongest ring of iron?
Mars.
Let's go Mars. Stoney, can you think of any other ring of iron that might be particularly strong?
It's got to be Perturabo's butthole, I guess.
That is correct, Stoney. That is the answer I have here. It is the butthole of Iron Warriors Primarch Perturabo.
Oh, yeah, nailed it.
Yeah, 3-2 to Stoney. Okay. Number 6. What is the largest ship that can be gained from Forge World?
From the shop or from the planet?
Don't know. It's a funny old quiz.
That big the manta ray thing, the towel.
It's another point for Stoney. He just saw the trick question coming.
Taking it all right.
I was expecting Matt to shout something like Gloriana class. Okay. Name one vehicle that is made in a Dark Mechanicus Hellforge.
Demon Engine?
I'm going to need more specific. Defiler will do. Yeah. Point to Matt there. Number 8. 2 questions to go. There are at least 21 different known variants of the Land Raider. Which one of these is not one of them? The Land Raider Ares, the Land Raider Crusader, or the Land Raider Valiant?
Valiant.
I'm going to say Crusader.
It is the Valiant, I'm afraid, which means it's a draw going into the last question.
Ooh.
Name a tech priest's favourite monkey.
Jacaro.
Oh, Matt jumps in there. It is, of course, a Jacaro, because they love fiddling. So it was very close there, Stoney. How do you feel?
Nice.
Well, I was trying to think of the name of it. I've had the Jacaro. I was just trying to think, is there like any Jacaros?
What, a named character Jacaro?
Yeah. Like a name of a Jacaro.
If there's not, there should be.
Like Gary the Jacaro.
We'll put it on random topic.
So if you're ever wondering about whether or not to go to Mars, what it might be like there, what is history like, I believe Welshie has some tourist information now on the Red Planet, as it's known. Give us a little info on where these Mechanicum boys live and operate, their main hub of operation.
Yeah, it's always nice to understand an area before you go there, especially if you have no hope of ever learning the language. So just a little rundown then from back in 30k days or before 30k. So for those of you that are listening that might not know too much about the Mechanicum, originally starting life as the Cult Mechanicus on Mars, the Emperor arrives there after the Age of Strife and has a chat with the guys there. He realizes he wants to conquer the galaxy and conquer the stars. And he decides that he needs the help of the Martians because they are essentially the industrial complex of the galaxy, or at least in terms of the Imperial side of things. So he enters into a treaty with Mars, and when he lands, some of the Martians see him as the physical embodiment of their god. So they've been praying to the machine god, the Omnissiah, and they see this golden shining guy land like all of the other human-based organisms do. And they see him as that kind of embodiment of their god. But he kind of sets out the plans because he is the Emperor after all. And he says to them, as part of the Treaty of Mars, that in return for building the Great Crusade Force, all the ships that he'll need and tanks and weaponry, he would let them have some form of autonomy and they could carry on their research and they could practice their faith, which was very important because obviously at the time there was the imperial truth. No one's allowed to believe in a god. Gods aren't real things. But he, as part of the treaty, allows the Mechanicum to continue believing in God, and that he would obviously protect their tech priests. But of course, 200 years goes by and this all kind of turns out to be bullshit. And the Mechanicum are not happy with their new overlord. They really are kind of cracking down on things. They're not getting a decent fair pay. They're not getting much out the bargain. And he's not really protecting them like he said he would. So during the 200 years, as we enter into the Horus heresy, Kelbor Hal rises to the Fabricator General position in charge, and he was forced to bend the knee to the Emperor, which is not going to make people happy, and feels pretty let down at this point. And this is where Horus comes in. So I thought I'd pause there, just ask you guys, how are you going to feel with this? Your society's being forced to bow the knee to the Emperor. You're not getting too much out of it. You know,
and all you're doing is spending your time making stuff for him, basically.
Exactly. It's not so much a treaty as a, if you don't do what I'm asking, I'm going to fuck you all up.
Well, and he told them what they couldn't look at as well, didn't he?
He did.
He said, you can't do this. You can do everything else.
Mm-hmm.
You can't look into this box of secrets.
That's right. A kind of
Pandora's box.
Yeah. That's there.
I don't know. When I've read the early Mechanicum books, I've kind of questioned whether they were right to betray the Emperor. I think they got too full of themselves, and they just wanted to find out what was in the box.
So I see this Kelbor Hal as being a guy that's like, at this point in the story, I see him as kind of right. He's been forced to subjugate to a lord when Mars was quite happy on its own. And when Regulus comes calling, maybe you see him as being quite right. So what happens then is Horus sends in his kind of worm tongue character, if you've seen Lord of the Rings, start whispering into the ears of Kelbor Hal and saying, look, I'm thinking of breaking up with my dad. I didn't want to be an orphan, but it seems to be the only way to go. I'm rounding up the boys. We've got Kurz on board. We've got Angron. We're going after the Emperor. We're going to split the Imperium in two. He hasn't been fair to you. Why don't you join me? At which point, Kelbor Hal just goes, well, that just sounds like the same deal I had before. I'm just going to be making stuff for you. And is quite wise to this by now and starts asking for a little bit more. So the eventual deal that's made with Horus is Horus says, if we win, if we take over the galaxy, we overthrow the Emperor, we will just take all of our troops out of all of the Forge worlds and leave you guys to it. And we're not even going to have any rules. And what we'll do is we'll even open Pandora's box for you. All that stuff that my daddy said you couldn't get to, I'm just going to give it to you. Yeah, whatever. And that box is called the Vaults of Moravec. So I'll pause again there. You've got a new deal. You're going to get left alone. Do you open the Vaults of Moravec?
I'm a sucker for deal or no deal, And so I'm going to go. I want to open the box. I want to see what's in the box,
But it's an idiotic decision because he's still always going to be seconded to the Emperor or Horus, and he should know that because he's learned that from the Emperor. He should know it's going to happen again. Why would you Yeah, I
So
don't
you're
know.
saying
I
he's a
don't-
bit of a fool for trusting
I think he's a
the
fool.
next
Yeah,
sunny boy that comes along?
But what if what's in the box is like the deeds to being the emperor? It says you're the emperor now on like an official piece of documentation or whatever it takes to officially be the emperor, and you're like, bam,
Yeah.
opens the box. Deal or no deal, baby.
We'll go back to the studio to find out if the box is opened. I can tell you that poor old Cowboy Hal did open the box.
Oh.
And what was in the box was what they refer to as scrap code, which is this code that ravages all of the interconnected cogitators within Mars. And essentially it's like a computer virus. Think Danny DeVito shouting there's a virus on your computer. Everything goes tits up on Mars because it's being corrupted by this computer virus, which is essentially the technological form of chaos.
It's kind of like when they buried those big plague vaults or whatever, like people who had the plague.
Yeah, opening them, digging too deep. I guess it's all. This is why I love all of the Horus Heresy stuff, because it all is just based essentially on standard storylines of ancient myth and legend, right? So you've got the forbidden knowledge of Pandora's box, and then you've got things like this where you get too much knowledge, you're flying too close to the sun, or you dig too deep and you unleash the Balrog. It's that
Icarus,
that classic tale. But there's one person, and hopefully we'll put this up on the YouTube as well, called Coriel Zeph. And she essentially is a really interesting character in the Mechanicum book, if you want to know more about her, who basically has her own Wi-Fi system. She's got her own separate router on Mars. So the scrap code doesn't get into any of her forges. And she's really interesting because she is like a breakaway splinter faction in the Mechanicum that doesn't believe the Emperor's a god and doesn't believe that there are any gods. She's like a true science Mechanicum. And basically her systems don't get corrupted. And the fact that she doesn't fall to this scrap code essentially starts the schism of Mars, which is the civil war that then rages on Mars between those loyal to the Emperor that haven't been influenced by this chaos virus and those that have been corrupted by Kelbor Howell's actions. And that schism and civil war goes on right to the end of the Horus Heresy and until the Emperor's slain.
So this virus is a chaos thing. Also.
Yeah, it's got these kind of weird chaos links to it because there is all this kind of, it's not really ever explained that well, but there's always, I guess that's where the demon engines and the God in the machine thing comes from, that there is this kind of supernatural spirit within the machine.
Stop me if I'm jumping ahead, but is there not also some kind of star Catan or something buried inside Mars?
Well, that is a good point. Yeah, deep within Mars is, so the lore would state, the Void Dragon, which we've seen recently how cool a model with just a minor shard of the Void Dragon looks.
Yeah.
Which there are stories that the Emperor
that was a mere toenail clipping of the Void Dragon. We've got to wait and see the full model of that bad boy.
But the Emperor buries
£7,000 it will cost from Forge World. But
the Emperor buries that before the Mechanicum exist.
Well, that's the rumor, isn't it, that the Emperor defeats the Void Dragon and buries it on Mars because the Emperor's been around for millennia.
And then the Mechanicum are possibly being influenced by the Catan.
Yeah, to the whole time. And whether these vaults, without giving too much bits of Mechanicum away, if you want to know how that story's kind of shaping up and access to that hidden Void Dragon vault, read that book. But I wanted to just ask you guys, like I say, to put this picture of Coriel Zeph up, because I think one of the things that I love most about the Mechanicum stuff is actually the artwork in the books. And it's the best example of John Blanche art. Like the word Blanchitsu is used a lot now online, but it is, to me, the pinnacle of that style.
I mean, I would say I entirely agree. Because the Mechanicum have existed in the art way before they existed in the game, and it's so cool. Like the pictures that they had of them, I always remember thinking like, I want some of these exact pictures, these John Blanche style weird, fucking half mechanical, half kind of alien, bizarre pictures. Like I always wanted some of these models in the game, and I love the Mechanicum range because it really does fulfill that itch for me.
And she's the good guy. That's 40k for you. This horrible picture that we're looking at. She's the one on the supposedly correct side of history in this battle and this civil war.
Yeah.
So
no, they were always so cool because it was always like they were like the handymen, you know, kind of just getting on with things. They were there'd be a picture of a big space marine, and then there's all a bunch of these dudes with a bunch of, you know, tendrils and things going around him doing things, and it's like it's so fucking cool to see them on the battlefield. It's
so funny how we've all kind of come up. You've both said exactly what I wanted to say for the Blast from the Past.
Right.
Because I don't know if we're going to go into that now.
Yeah, get the music in now.
The 70s,
the 80s,
the 90s.
Oh, we're going back in time. Is that a space squat?
It's time we take you back with a blast from the past. All right, do it back.
But the blast from the past, because so we just mentioned the Skitarii range, the Admech range. It came out in 2015. I remember it being a massive thing. It really caught my interest. But my interest was already caught by all this classic artwork that was in all the rule books. The one on our screen is a particular favorite of mine, which is an old John Blanche sketch, which was colorized. But he always did artwork of all these weird people, like almost in the background, and even like the forge. The Forge Masters and all this weird proper 40k artwork. And obviously the Admech have been a massive faction in the lore. And they're not even in the background, but they didn't have any models and a proper range for ages, which is really weird because I think everybody loves that classic artwork.
I scaled I've been buying a lot of squats recently. I'm having a bit of an old hammer revival because I just love kind of washing up and repainting the models. But so I went back and looked at all the old Rogue Traeger catalogs. There's a great website called Collecting Citadel Miniatures that has all of the old catalogs online. And I went back, and the only thing that I could find early in Rogue Trader was 1989, and it was just this one metal tech priest. And then the same year they made a metal squat. Like a tech priest squat, and they were literally the first two models that existed that were anything to do with the Admech.
I managed to find that there are a few more 89 tech priests. They look very similar to the one you're looking at now, and I couldn't remember them at all, and I was surprised to find the squat, which is quite cool. But I'm sure I've tried to find it earlier. I'm sure I've seen like early versions of the Skitarii, because the Skitarii have been in the lore forever as well. There's these like legions of red-robed, like fanatical tech people. But I couldn't find it. But
what I was thinking about was, if you go back and listen to our interview with friend of the show, Gav Fort, you'll remember he said a couple of things that I think are quite relevant to this. First thing was he said when he was working at Games Workshop, they always said there'd never be a Primarch, there'd never be a Primarch, there'd never be a Primarch. And in a way, this kind of tech, Mechanicus stuff is sort of similar. This stuff that's always existed in the lore first. And the other kind of, which sort of leads into the other interesting thing he said from when he was working there, which is that the lore always came first and was this thing that needed to be protected and like spawned the rest of the game, essentially, spawned everything else. The lore was number one. So you've got all these crazy pictures, these John Blanche pictures and stuff going on in the background with all these fiddly little bits and things like that. And, these kind of this protecting of, maybe we shouldn't do Primarchs. The Primarchs will never be in the game, blah, blah, blah. And now we're at a different stage at Games Workshop where we have the technology to make models like these John Blanche ones. The rules have had to move on. They've had to change. They've had to evolve. It just sort of shows you, like Gav Fort was right when he said the lore drives everything. It's like these kind of pictures, this kind of we all remember these pictures looking in the early books and things like that. It's so iconic to the whole Games Workshop range. It proves the point so well that this is the stuff that we want to see on the tabletop. Like, even if it's 15 years down the line or whatever, it just makes it's so spot on. But it does kind of make you wonder, like, what is that for Games Workshop now, though? Is there anything that exists in the lore that we want to see on the tabletop that we're prepared to wait 15 years for, except for Fulgrim, but 15 years for or whatever? But maybe you are right. Maybe they've got to portion out the Primarchs this way to keep up that kind of similar sort of level of interest. Maybe they do have to get, there's a fuckload of Primarchs. Let's face it,
I think they do it in smaller scale now as well, though. So they'll bring out a game like the Blackstone Fortress, and they'll write stuff into the lore within that game that is then included with it.
That's a very good point.
Rather than a galactic scale. But there are changes, like we said, with this new Abnet model with these weird winged space marines and stuff. Maybe that will feed in somehow. But
to be fair, there's so much from the past. I'm still waiting on this Gene Stealer limo, and I'll wait another goddamn 15 years if I have to, but I will see that on the board, damn it.
Well, one guy who has had literally his name in the game from pretty much near the start is old Arkan Land, which is, I always still find hilarious that the Land Raider is called the Land Raider because it was designed by Magos Arkan Land, and he's one of my favourite characters, and I couldn't not mention him before we move into 40k.
What if it'd been called Arkham Bum? And it was the Bum Raider.
Bum Raider. Well, maybe that's one of the 21 different ones that we mentioned in the quiz. Who knows? Just to mention him, he was really cool. He designed the Land Raider Proteus at the time, which was the first Land Raider, which has now been represented in the Horus Heresy game, which looks similar but different to the current Land Raider. Matt, you're the tank expert. It's got tracks all the way around the edges. Is that more like a real life tank than the Land Raider?
This model, though, it's only been out for a few years, but this model, when I saw it for the first time, I thought it was genius, because the thing Forge World do with the Horus Heresy stuff is they try and bring it back to like the old school 40k models, where they've tried to make this look like the first metal Land Raider. So they've designed the Horus Heresy vehicles to look like the original Games Workshop stuff. Like, some of them look like the old school silly rhinos. So the tracks that go around the outside, they do that in the Land Raider, and you can see in the track guards that it does it. But it's a funny looking thing. But I love the fact that they tie it in with the original metal model from the 90s, if not before the 90s. So I quite like it.
I mean, it's a classic, isn't it? The Land Raider is classic, and I will always play mine sometimes in games, regardless of anything else that comes out. But let's not forget that Larkin Land also gave his name to the Land Speeder, another 40k classic. And one that I didn't know, the other third STC, standard template construct, that he found was for something called the Land Crawler, which was essentially a big farming robot, which is the basis of the Onager Dune Crawler in the current AdMech range. And he also, written into the lore, found or made up, actually, the science behind grav plates. So if anyone is to blame for all of the floating Primaris tanks, it is probably Arkan Land himself.
Oh, man. That's some really cool lore, actually. Looking at the Walker thing and knowing it's like a farming thing kind of makes sense, really.
Yeah. They kind of created this character, didn't they, in the last few years, and it's really kind of embedded itself. There's a couple of weapons and artifacts that my current 8th edition codex allows you to use that are relics from him. So they've plugged it into all the books and the lore and the
there's a whole cult apparently called the Landites that study him and his history, and
it was one of those pieces of silly lore that they just doubled down on. It's like, why can't, it's like old Inquisitor Sherlock Inspector Clouseau or whatever his name is.
Well, aside from coming up with the concepts, I just wanted to tell you 2 other little facts about him, which is cool. One, he had a monkey. He had a pet monkey on his shoulder the whole time with like cybernetic, not a Jacaro, a real monkey with cybernetic implants. which is
Does
cool.
that mean that Jacaro's are they a land thing as well?
Maybe
Then
the
maybe
land
he did the
Jacaro.
first
The
Jacaro by
land
sticking
monkey.
a bunch of cybernetics inside a monkey. It's a land monkey. Don't call it a Jacaro.
In the Siege of Terror, there's this amazing scene where there's a breach in the wall, and the Black Legion or the Sons of Horus go in to try and get through the crack, and he fills it with concrete. Like, he comes up with this new recipe for concrete and solidifies them alive in there, which is really cool. And then also that of all of the Black Library that I've read, other than Malcador and maybe Valdor, he's the only person that has a conversation with the Emperor, where the Emperor talks to him as if he's like some kind of equal. So there's this amazing scene in Master of Mankind where Land walks in and the Emperor's got Angeron on the table, and he's like knocked out. And he basically asks Land to check his science. So he asks Land if he thinks there's a way to get the butcher's nails out of Angeron without killing him. And Land's like, no, it can't be done. And he doesn't, like, the Emperor doesn't look sad or anything. And Land asks him, like, why aren't you their dad? Don't you look sad? And that's when the Emperor says this sentence. I got it verbatim from Master of Mankind.
It is not my son, Archon. None of them are. They are warlords, generals, and tools bred to serve a position and a place.
And it's this real like bit where you don't and then he goes on to tell this really cool story about Pinocchio and why does Pinocchio call Giuseppe father? Like, they're just tools to him. And it's this really cool, like, I can't think of many other characters that have had that kind of dialogue with the Emperor.
Well, maybe it's the same. Maybe the Emperor thinks that him and Ark and Lan are kind of the same as these creators of, these are just tools to him. He's a creator of tools, much the same way that old Ark and Land is.
Yeah.
But it could also be maybe the Emperor isn't as simple as that. Maybe the Emperor tells you what you want to hear. So the Emperor is talking to him as an engineer, as like you said about him looking after a creation. Like, it's just, they're not my sons. It's just a creation I've created. Like, you create a tank to serve a purpose. So maybe on that level, they almost, the Emperor is putting on a level that he understands the Emperor.
Yeah,
like deliberately, rather than saying. But that's what the Emperor tells Guilliman in 40k when Guilliman goes into the throne room, and the Emperor's like, "Yeah, I'm not your son. You're not my son. I don't care about you. I've never cared about any of you." And Guilliman's like, "Oh, my whole world is destroyed, but I'm going to go out and defend the Imperium."
Civil war.
Like,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no. But I think even then, the Emperor is, maybe it isn't completely true, but the Emperor's telling him that so that he'll get off his arse and go out and fight, rather than sitting around moping about his dad. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good point.
It's quite
well, unfortunately, Ark and Land is dead, unlike another old boy from the Horus Heresy that's around, which I know Matt's gagging to tell everybody about.
Belisarius Cawl is probably one of the most influential figures now in 40k. Whereas in the Horus Heresy, he was alive, but he was a young sprout, a young man. But I was thinking the other day, like, when Belisarius Cawl came out, he obviously appeared from nowhere when the model came out, and he has had an incredibly huge impact on the lore, but also on like creating the tool with which Games Workshop would reintroduce new Space Marine models and loads of new tanks. And when you think about how he's just some tech priest, he's not even the leader of the Mechanicum. It's quite weird how they've created this, like, almost like a super character, and they've created all these new story arcs. Where
you could argue that he's like responsible for this rumors. Boom. Like, you wouldn't have Games Workshop in the national newspapers without this massive stock market boom. And that's only come about since the release of like the 8th edition and him and Primaris.
He kind of is the model that represents that in a way. Yeah, it does. I mean, I always think it's funny. I love that model; is amazing. The Belisarius Cawl model, like we're saying, spot on. John Blanche, spot on, like fucking amazing. But I always think
Yeah.
it's funny. I remember you describing it one time, Matt, as like a circus tent with like an octopus circus tent or something,
Yeah.
and it is kind of like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just an incredible model. But yeah, go on.
I mean, the character, like, I've got so many notes here, but I don't really want to just list through them. Like when he came out, he was obviously the tool with which Games Workshop would introduce all this new lore, because they've had 10,000 years of stagnation, and they could write in a story where he is working behind everyone's back. He's kind of working in secret.
He existed, just out of curiosity, had he existed in the lore prior to the reboot kind of thing?
But this is
maybe he is like, I mean, that's it. He's the MacGuffin character. He's the cornerstone character they needed.
Yeah, but this is the genius thing that started to come from it, is that Games Workshop and specifically Black Library have started to take that character and really kind of flesh him out a lot more. And the books that he is in, I've always really enjoyed. I thought he's quite a funny character, and you can kind of connect with him in a weird kind of way, because he believes that that innovation is the thing that the cult Mechanicus should be striving for, and that anything other than innovation is wrong. Like, they should be striving to innovate technology. They shouldn't be stagnating. And so on that way, you kind of agree with his thoughts, because that's what we think of in the 21st century. And he's been in loads of audio books now. And there's the one where he's in with the Lehman Russ, isn't he? Like, where there's more of his backstory. Wolfsbane. And then there's 40k books now so he's been written into the 30k lore in quite a big way for some low adept. And he's in loads of 40k Black Library books now, where there's all of this stuff with the Catan, isn't there, where he tricks the Catan and he's trying to work on the Pharos project, which is really big in 30k, and they're kind of leaving so many doors open for his story and the 40k lore to evolve over time. And it's quite cool that they're building this character in 30k and 40k at the same time.
Well, it's like not only is he the guy that's kind of given Games Workshop their latest financial success, but he is the first. We literally just said Gav used to say lore always came first, but this is the first model who's genuinely influenced the lore backwards.
Yeah,
from model to lore.
Yeah,
or maybe the lore needed something, so they made them. You know, I mean, it's a chicken and egg argument in a way, isn't it? But yeah, that is interesting for sure.
The thing I've always thought lore-wise with Cool, like you've said, Matt, that he's all about innovation and lack of restriction. Is if he was in the place of Kelbor Hal and the Emperor was trying to prevent him looking into stuff, I think he would have made exactly the same decision. What's the difference between Cool and Kelbor Hal?
But Kelbor Hal comes across as quite a dark, evil character. Belisarius Cool comes out as like a kind of like a bumbling fool. Yeah. He basically in 40k Stoney, he ends up with like loads of different saved copies of himself, and he's got like 3 different brains and all these different subconsciousnesses, and he's had his mind wiped loads of times because he's been alive for over 10,000 years. And in 30k, he hates the idea of cutting off parts of your human body and turning yourself into a machine. He doesn't like that at all. So it's quite funny when you see what he's become. Yeah.
Circus tent.
There's one of the 40k books where it describes how he is kind of in his living quarters, but he isn't actually, he's not the size that you see him as that model. He kind of clips into that model, like he's lowered into his like full on tech priest robe suit.
Like one of the little things in a Dalek.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was something. I imagined it was like like Thunderbirds getting ready to it's just like weird. Joining this mechanical centipede and then running around.
So is there a chance that Belisarius cool in terms of the lore and the model and everything like this? Is kind of a successful Poochie character from The Simpsons. You know, this kind of shoehorned in character that they needed to kind of progress the plot and things like that, but just done really well. I mean, is there a possibility that that's kind of how the character came into existence? Like you're saying, you know, this kind of, is it reverse engineered model first? I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
There's some wild rumors online. So before that book Matt mentioned where he's written back into 30k, that Cool was Archenland, and Cool had forgotten plot twist because he's got these multiple consciousness and he has this ability to, he does it with his mentor, he can like pull their entire consciousness into his, and that maybe he was Archenland after the whole time, or Cool absorbed Archenland and has just kind of forgotten that has happened, and that's how he knows about grav plates, and he knows about the data science from other people, and he's just kind of doesn't really, he's basically got Alzheimer's. He knows all this stuff, but he doesn't really know how he got this information.
He's such a weird, so, and for like, you almost imagined a tech priest as being quite a funny character to try to write as and try to humanize, but they do it really well with him. Like he is just like a crazy, it's really really interesting character. But there's all the rumors of, so in at the end of the Horus Heresy, well, after nearly like 1,000 years later, but Goodieman hears of Belisarius Cool, and he gives him this relic with all of the Primarch's gene seeding. So the two missing ones, and the traitors and the loyalists. He gives Cool this relic and is like, you need to continue the work of the Emperor and create new Space Marines, and you need to create a way for the loyal Primarchs to stay alive. Like you need to keep us alive. And he goes away and works on that for the best part of 9,000 years in his fleet of warships, and then miraculously appears at the right time to he gets involved in Cadia, and he
comes back right at the start of 8th edition, ready to launch the Space Marine range.
Well, you see, that's when outsourcing goes right, when you give them a deadline and they show up on time.
And he arrives at Macragge. So he plays around with the Cadian pylons because he's been researching them for thousands of years, and going to the other planets that they're on, realizes they're Necrons, and he kind of works out how they work. But Tarazin the Infinite turns up and helps him turn them on during the 13th Black Crusade, but then they fail, and he ends up at Macragge just as the Black Legion break into the throne room with Goodieman's stasis chamber, and essentially the Ultramarines don't want to let him anywhere near the Primarch, but he's like, what choice have you got? Because you're about to lose the Primarch. So
he's a full case, put him in my machine. Right place. That's it. He breaks the fourth wall.
But Goodieman doesn't really trust him because he knows that he's got the gene seed for the traitor Primarchs, and we've spoken about this before, but he just worries that Cool, someone who's never followed the rules of the Mechanicum, is going to do something, and Cool is trying to make Belisarius Cool him become the Fabricator General of Mars, which would basically a forced promotion.
Here's a question for you then. Let's say all the stuff we've been talking about earlier is true, and there is going to be some kind of civil war within the Imperium. Where do the Mechanicum stand? Are they kind of neutral almost? Are they on their own side essentially? Are they kind of, or are they full on?
I'd say they're on their own side. I think that was the first thing I kind of wanted to touch on so we've looked at the 30k Mechanicum, and then after the Horus Heresy, they were renamed into the Adeptus Mechanicum, and they were the cleanup on Mars must have been insane. But anyway, you have to think of them even in 40k as like a separate empire. They're like an empire within an empire, so they do have their own, very much their own. They have their own program their own targets,
It's
their own
interesting
agenda,
now, though,
their own
because
agenda.
they're so religiously tied into the Emperor as the Omnissiah.
Well, that's-
are there sects
yeah.
in current Mechanicus that don't believe in the Emperor as a god? Are there bands that are
no, but there are
desperate?
different sects.
So what is the
I
big
don't know.
difference between the Mechanicum and the Scutari?
Well, the Scutari are. Well, I was trying to find out what the big difference is between the Mechanicum in 30k and the Adeptus Mechanicus in 40k. So they've had 10,000 years. I guess. Well, they've stagnated more, but when you read about 30k, they're still obsessed with the same things. Maybe they're slightly more obsessed now with the STC, finding the STC constructs. You're right; they are more interwound with the Imperium because they basically run the Golden Throne. So, if the Mechanicum, I think, would always be on the side of the Emperor. So, if there was some sort of civil war, because the Imperium needs the Mechanicus to survive, but the Mechanicus doesn't necessarily need the Imperium to survive.
I think that's
because they could just
with
turn the Golden Throne off.
But does
with
the
the Dark
Imperium kind of
Mechanicus.
give them purpose, though, even
Well,
if they don't
yeah.
need them to survive?
Yeah,
it's
I
kind
think
of-
they do believe I think they do believe that the Emperor is the avatar of the Omnissiah. He's the physical being of the machine god. They do believe that, and you don't read about sects that don't believe that. I think 10,000 years it's become more and more ingrained, and I don't think there's people within the Mechanicum that want to be independent of that. Even Cool believes that the Emperor is the avatar of the Omnissiah. He just believes that the best way to protect the Emperor and the Omnissiah is to innovate. That we will defeat our enemies by innovation.
I guess with the big war now is that the Dark Mechanica in 40k, the Dark Mechanicus exist, although they don't have any models. There are like Chaos Tech. Well, they're not called Tech. Warp Smiths are the Tech priests in Chaos armies, aren't they? But
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, we were talking about how, maybe they keep it. What are they going to keep back for a new range? That Dark Mechanicus is now 100% something I would love to see on
yeah.
the battlefield.
Oh,
yeah.
really,
I had an idea earlier though, because that Dark Mechanicus would be a great army. But what if Games Workshop, instead of bringing out a fully fledged army, they brought out like conversion kits where instead of having a whole range and like a codex, maybe you can buy stratagems and you can plug it onto your Codex Mechanicus, and they have like a range of conversion kits for loads of technical bits, loads of
Like
things.
in a way, that's kind of what I was saying about them being a neutral army. Is like maybe as you buy, that could be a future thing if they really in an alternate universe where this is like a full-on thing, the Civil War has gone down or whatever. Maybe when you get a Mechanicus kit, it could come with Imperium or Dark Mechanicus stuff in the box, and you could do it either way. It's kind of a neutral army essentially. It could go one way or the other.
yeah, that'd be quite cool.
But the Scutari are so within the Adeptus Mechanicus, they're like, it's not just engineering, they're like the Imperium's masters of science, which I guess is also a difference with the Mechanicum, because over 10,000 years of everyone hiding from technology, they're the only scientists left. But they have the biologists and they have all the different, so they're into biology, they're into all science. We know them mostly for making stuff and their Forge Worlds, which are their entire worlds dedicated to creating the main elements of the Imperium's war machines. And the Scutari essentially are there to protect the Forge World. So every Forge World has, they tend to all have a Titan Legions, and they all have Scutari Legions, which are effectively their planetary defense force, and they are there to protect the Titan Legions as well. They're like the infantry, so they're not tech priests. They're just, some of them might be normal humans that are born on the Forge World, and instead of going into working in the factories, they are inducted into the Scutari.
They're a bit like the
they are the
Imperial
foot
Guard
soldiers.
of the the reign, like
but in amongst them there's other like units like the Castellan robots, the Logica, I can't remember the name.
Cybernetica.
But
Cybernetica, that's what I've not really, because that's coming dangerously close to abominable intelligence, what they call it in 40k. You know, the banned reason that everything plunged into darkness in the first place. I don't know how they get away with those cast-down robots. They need to get taken off the table, Matt.
No.
With all 78 shots, never to be used again.
Yeah.
Well, they're like ancient. I think like every time you kill one, which isn't very often.
Shots fired.
Sick bird. Enter air horn noise.
They are like they're relics from almost like the after age of the Horus Heresy. So they're like, every one of them is like 9,000 years old. They can't build them anymore. They just repair them, and so they are ancient relics. The AI thing, yeah. Well, that's why you have to reprogram them with those like VCR tapes that you put in their front, like to change their commands.
Well, how does all that stuff sit with, like, obviously the Mechanicum, and you've got things like the Tau out there that have got these crazy guns and stuff. Surely they're kind of interested in some of that shit. Are they allowed to get their hands on that kind of thing?
There are. It's kind of like your Inquisitor. So you have Inquisitors that are into chaos, and you have Inquisitors that are into Xenos. And there are tech priests that will be into Xenos technology. But one of the core beliefs of the Mechanicum is that the power of technology is so interwoven with the Omnissiah, and they believe that the Emperor is the Omnissiah and the god of humanity, that all technology is only pure and perfect if it's created by man. So they are interested in Xenos technology, and they capture Xenos technology and they take it back to the Forge Worlds to investigate it, but they wouldn't copy it, because they just try and work out how they can beat it, but they wouldn't copy it.
The stuff that I've read is like they investigate it all and they just set fire to everything they found out. Like that's the bits that I've read.
You know, mankind has changed a lot in 40,000 years, because if you've ever watched the QVC shopping channel, people are not scared to rip off previous inventions. Mankind is definitely not scared to rip off other previous inventions.
But it's all interwoven with their religion.
Yeah. I think there's so much for them to go. I'd love to see a Dark Mechanicum range in the future. We haven't got time to go into the models now, but we've talked about lots of them in the past. They all look great, in my opinion. It's Jez Goodwin from the page into a plastic model, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And if you're wondering why we haven't talked about the Titan Legions, it's because we'll have a whole episode on those at some other point.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that Demon Engines in particular are something that, like, when I was really getting back into Warhammer back in the olden days after my time off, was something I was reading about. I think a Forge World book must have just come out with some rules for Demon Engines, but without really releasing proper Demon Engine models. So they always kind of left it open to some of these sort of creations. And especially if you want to make Nurgle stuff and you want to make like a big Nurgle demon engine, that would be such a fun sculpting project. So when I was getting back into Warhammer back all those years ago, I really wanted there to be some of this big stuff that I could like practice my sculpting on that was a bit bigger and that kind of thing. So yeah. That would have been good. I'm definitely, I would 100% get into some of that. Like those Titans, but are demons, if you know what I mean. A demon Titan kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, fingers crossed that when we do our little summary YouTube video on Saturday or Sunday, the last day of Warhammer Fest, whichever one it is, we'll be sat here saying, we predicted this.
What, the Lion and Fulgrim both came out? Welcome back, everybody, to this part of the show that they call the random topic generator. You all know the score. We roll a dice and Lady Luck fingers it with her dainty hands and blesses it with a number which we then use to determine a topic which we will talk about on this, the random topic generator. So, Welshie, have you got the company dice?
Of course. Here we go.
Is it ready to roll?
It's rolled and it's random and it's a 2. Which is randomly nothing to do with today's episode. If you were an AdMech adept, what body mod would you add to yourself?
I don't know. What do you guys think? There's a lot out there.
Is that an honest random roll?
That was just completely random. The Omnissiah is looking down on us.
Girth.
Just general girth.
Just
No.
You'll be.
I've got some emails in my spam folder I could send you. Like.
I had one that even the AdMech would be proud of, which was gain 7 inches in 4 days.
Wow,
which I thought would be,
yeah,
especially if it's girth.
Man, can you imagine how big Belisarius Cool's knob is if he spent all these years like adding bits to himself?
Blimey.
That's probably what one of these mechadendrites is.
Yeah, that's all it's there. I think there's obvious physical adaptations that you'd want, right? But maybe I'd like something I'd like to be able to read and process much quicker so that I had to spend less time doing my actual job.
Handy. Yeah. Well, so you've got like a kind of one of those paper input slots like in your belly, and you just put it in there and then you just shit out the page and you've read everything on it.
Exactly.
That would be cool.
Or wouldn't you like your eye could almost take a picture of a page and then you could like process it
like
when you
an
sleep.
Internal storage, like I could close my eyes and go to a folder and open something up and control F to find exactly what I'm looking for. Like
a mind palace.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that I would have night vision, like a night vision bionic eye. I think that'd be quite cool, quite useful, and then you could be really successful in the criminal underworld.
That's what you'd use it. You think the only thing holding you back from the criminal underworld is the ability to see in the dark.
Well, now you say it like that.
All right, cool. Well, my first instinct was obviously a sweet pair of double Ds, but failing that, I'm going for sweat windscreen wipers because summertime is coming, and I'm a ginger man out here in the sun working. I'm a ginger working man out here slaving in the sun, sweating, and it gets hot, and I need these sweat windscreen wipers.
Where would you have them, like in place of your eyebrows?
All the key areas, and they just disperse the sweat when needed.
There we are. Another one solved, guys.
So welcome back to this last part of the show, the little bit we like to call the Lords of Lore, where I pit Matt and Welshie against each other in a lore-based kind of quiz that we've done about Warhammer 40,000. And this week, obviously, we've been talking about the Mechanicum, but that got me to wondering, how fucking expensive is all this shit, right? The Mechanicum are out here making a bunch of shit. It sounds like it all costs a pretty fucking penny. So that got me to thinking, how much does 40k cost in real life? So I'm going to ask you how much you think something from 40k costs, and I'm going to, using Large Blast Podcast Computer, I've tried my very best to work out the monetary value of what things in 40k cost today.
Okay. What currency do we tell you them in?
In pound coins, please. We're going to do a Price is Right style situation. So anyone closest without going over. Okay.
Okay.
So first up, how much do you think a jump pack would cost? So a Space Marine jump pack. How much do you reckon that would cost in today's money?
How much does it cost for a pint of beer?
Basically, okay. So the formula, this all started when I was trying to work out if there would be a monetary cost to like a point in Warhammer. So if there would be like every point you spent on the Warhammer table on a battle, whether that had a monetary cost.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Seeing if there would be some armies that would be more expensive than others. And then it spiraled crazily out of control to this thing where I started doing essentially. So for instance, this jump pack one, I'll give you a little insight into how I broke it down. I found out how much what the cost for 2 jet engines that had the capacity to raise something that weighed as much as a Space Marine to an altitude of 29 feet, and then the housing and stuff for that. So that's how much. How much do you think all of that would cost?
I'm going to say it would cost about, I reckon about £3.5 million.
Okay,
I'm going more. I'm going 15 million.
15 million from Welshie. Well, I'm going to have to give it to Matt. This one actually only cost 662k. So the jet engines are actually surprisingly cheap,
Yeah.
at only
Very cool.
£6,000 each, and then the rest of the housing made up the rest of the costs. So there you go. So how much do you think a Rhino would cost in today's money? And I'll give you a brief insight into my workings out here. Basically, I looked at how much different tanks cost, then I looked at how much they weighed, and then I worked out a monetary value between weight and cost, and then applied that to a Rhino.
I have absolutely no idea how much a tank costs.
I reckon £800,000.
£800,000.
I
Okay.
think that you might be in the ballpark for a tank that we use today, but I reckon if you looked up how much a Rhino costs, it's going to weigh so much more than a tank nowadays that it's
Do you want me to
got to
give you
be more.
so a
I'm
tank
going to go
nowadays?
5 mil.
5 mil.
I think
And
a
what did
Rhino
you
would
say,
weigh
Matt?
less at 800,000.
Okay, I'm going to have to give it to Welshie because the actual cost was £46 million.
What?
What was the weight of a Rhino?
I can't remember, but an average tank weighs 64 tons and costs about 23 million.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, I know, right?
The in my Imperial Armor book, they have all the weights of the Lehman Russes and stuff, and they are like the same weight as a modern tank.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, not a Rhino, apparently. Take
Well,
that
no,
up
it's-
with old Arkan Lan.
Yeah.
Anyway, so how much would a power hammer cost to make in real life?
Oh god. So what you need, like some energy thing, and
Can we also try and guess how you guessed what it was?
Yeah,
look up,
like
like,
this one.
Cattle
This one's a
prod.
lot less technical. I'll
Did
give
you
you
look
that.
up the price of a cattle prod and times it by the weight of a hammer? Is that?
That's more technical than.
I reckon that it would be about £800,000.
£800,000 from Matt. Welshie, what do you think?
I think all you did was multiply the cost of a hammer by the weight of a thunder hammer, so it's going to be something like 500 quid.
Well, I'm going to have to give it to Welshie.
Oh.
So basically, what I did was I found the price of a mid-range sledgehammer from B&Q, £60.
Yeah.
Car battery, 50 quid. Rubber glove costs £1. Actual price, 111 quid.
Why do you need a rubber glove to stop
you from getting electrocuted from the bloody car battery? Jesus Christ, Matt. It's like you've never used a sledge power hammer before.
Don't try building a battery-powered power hammer at home whilst breathing in your resin, guys.
Yeah.
Assuming that a custode's armor is made out of solid gold, how much does a set of custode armor cost in today's currency?
Oh man, that is
It's a lot.
Well, I reckon one of those gold bars is about
I've got no idea.
200,000.
I go 25 million.
So I will say 17 million.
17 million. All right, I'm going to have to give this one to Welshie because it's actually 80 million. 500,992 pounds 82 pence.
That's very
So
accurate.
every
Good
custode
work.
you kill is costing the Imperium a shitload of money. Remember that. Anyway,
Imagine how heavy it would be.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they've got the weight. It's 180 kg.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow, I would have guessed way more than that.
Yeah, I know, right? But apparently that's what
No,
it says
no,
in their
no.
codex.
But if you made the same volume out of gold, it would weigh way more.
But that's what it says in the codex.
No,
yeah,
but it's not made
gold.
of pure
Yeah,
gold,
Yeah,
so-
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
You wouldn't get a shoot of armor out of 180 kilograms of gold.
We're arguing about what a custode's armor is made from.
It's pure gold, obviously. It's how it. Look at the paint job. Your eyes don't deceive you. It's like flat earther logic, but with what's going on in the paint. Anyway, all right. How much do you guys think an Invader ATV costs in today's money?
I'm gonna go with 500 quid again, because I think you looked up something like maybe $2,000, because I reckon you've gone with like a ride-on lawnmower or something like that.
I don't know where you would have got that. I love the Invader ATV. Matt, what do you think it would be?
Oh, it's very hard to know whether to go more or less. So, because I was thinking like a couple of motorbikes strapped together or something, but yeah, like a buggy, £1,000.
Okay, £1,000. Right. Well, let me break down my costing for you guys here. I went online and I managed to find an Erigo Rocky Premier Kids 12-volt ride-on SUV Jeep toy for £749. All right. If we get the spare battery with that, that's an extra £45. Okay, so that brings us up to £794.99. Okay, a minigun apparently costs the army £250,000. Right, 200. So the actual cost of an Invader ATV is £250K, £794.99. So who went a bit higher? Who was the bit higher there?
Well, she went higher.
Welshie, you are the winner for that particular point. Okay. How much do you guys think a Tau Riptide battle suit would cost you without all the guns, just the battle suit?
How have you done this one? That's what this game has now become.
Yeah.
How have you done this one?
I was thinking like some sort of composite, maybe, or maybe you just build it like cosplay, so it might be really cheap because you don't have the guns as well.
I'm going with a tenner. I'm going to lowball it for like an inflatable sumo suit.
I mean, I reckon it's just a cosplay, so a couple of hundred, maybe it's £300.
300. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to have to give this one to you, Matt, because you can actually buy an experimental mech suit on Amazon Japan for £1 million from a company called Caractus. And this is an experimental mech suit that looks a lot like a Riptide, but it has wheels on it. If you want to actually make it work, you need to hire a team of 2 experts for a year, plus parts, which is probably going to cost you another $1 million. So you're looking at about £2 million for a Riptide suit. So Matt, that's a point to you.
Without the guns.
Without the guns, yeah.
You got to take the ATV.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So last question, all to play for. I've not been keeping track of the points at all. So all to play for. We're going to call it a draw. Whoever gets this one wins in classic Large Blast podcast style. So how much is an Orc space cruiser? How much does that cost to build in
they're just
today's money?
Made of rocks and shit, aren't they? So I'm going to say, well, my instinct was to say they're for free because it's just rubbish and gubbins and stuff. And they just collected it and nicked it.
That was what I was going to say.
Free. Okay. Well, if you both say free, then I can't give either of you a point on this last one, I'm afraid, because you're actually up on the deal 200 quid if you enter Scrap Heap Challenge, right? Because hear me out. You need a CPU to operate your massive space cruiser that's capable of intergalactic challenge, right? Now, this is one for all the science nerds out there. You guys might know Slimer, the mold slime based CPU robot. I know that you do, Welshie.
Big fan.
That apparently cost £800. So if you spend £800 on your CPU and then enter Scrap Heap Challenge, win with an Orc battle cruiser, the £1,000, you're up on the deal, 200 quid. So there you go.
There we are.
You're making money if you're playing Orcs. Making it.
40k Scrap Heap Challenge would be great.
Anyway, well, I can't remember. I didn't work out who the winner was. Did any of you guys keep score?
The winner's always Warhammer.
The winner is Games Workshop that sold us all this stuff in the first place. This is just small peanuts to them. They're rocking around in this custode armor made of solid gold. We all saw. You guys didn't see on our Gav Thorpe interview. He was wearing a solid gold suit. Anyway,
yeah, he was.
That's been this episode of the Large Blast podcast. We'll see you guys all next time. Bye.
Crazy on the side.
Bye.